From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
The dairy dilemma, trade uncertainty and anemic prices, but opportunities for some.
One Indiana dairy business is changing this month, and it all has to do with an opportunity with Walmart.
Walmart is definitely going to make being a dairyman easier.
We'll explain ahead in the show.
Could this week bring another heavy tariff blow to China? And how will the country respond? An analysis. Could disease in China's pork sector present opportunities for U.S. producers?
So it's just the scariness of those headlines and the potential that months down the road that could turn into a really large epidemic.
Machinery Pete is not just a land lover.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The dairy industry has seen its fair share of issues over the past year. Will a new month bring fresh resolution to some of its biggest challenges? From uncertainty around trade deals to retaliatory tariffs, falling milk prices, and increasing production, dairy has felt its fair share of bumps in 2018. NAFTA negotiators focusing squarely on dairy during discussions last week, including talks around market access. One of the issues recently has been processors canceling contracts. So in Indiana, a newly opened milk processing plant owned by Walmart is changing how some dairy farmers are doing business. National reporter Betsy Gibbons stopped by one farm that's changing its business model because of it.
Brian Huyen is used to spending his time in the calf barn. It was his everyday role when he came back to the operation in 2003. Much has changed since the farm's beginning.
My grandfather started the dairy in 1945 after World War II.
Brian returned to the farm in Plymouth, Indiana, who he now co-owns with his wife, Jill. They're milking 4,800 cows on 3 different facilities in both a conventional parlor and with robots, a large investment they added a year and a half ago.
It was definitely a risk, but we knew if we wanted to stay competitive long term that we needed to do this.
Like other dairies, they are feeling the impacts of milk prices dropping deep in the red and staying, witnessing dairies leaving the business.
In years past, dairy was always on a 3-year cycle, and I think a lot of dairymen felt that the fall of 2017 things were going to turn around.
But with processors and co-ops dropping contracts, Huyens feared it could happen to them until their dairy was victim as well. When DMS, their milk marketing cooperative, dropped them.
We got a letter last April that said in 6 months that DMS would no longer be in business. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking.
Dairy Farmers of America, who own DMS, stepped up and offered the Huyens a contract and an opportunity to go elsewhere.
DFA did treat us very fair.
But soon an opportunity fell into their laps. It was an offer they couldn't refuse.
Starting September 1st, our milk will be going to Walmart.
Walmart opened a proprietary plant near Fort Wayne, Indiana. The company is planning on bottling its own milk, eliminating the co-op, processor, or middleman, taking milk straight from the dairy into its plant.
Walmart is definitely going to make being a dairyman easier.
This will be the first of many people, I'm sure, that they're going to be putting contracts together with to supply that plant. And in the wake of Dean's dropping producers, this is welcome news.
North says a plant buying from dairymen is not new. Companies like Walmart are choosing to buy straight from the source for marketing reasons and to secure volume to keep a plant operational.
Especially with the investment they made, they need to make sure that there's milk coming into that plant every single day. And the best way they can do that is sign a contract with a farmer.
North says some plants around the country buy spot milk, loads other processors don't have room for at the time. It's usually cheaper, but can be a risk. He expects companies to mirror Walmart and start to buy straight from the producer. That's because companies cannot take a chance of being low on milk.
As we get into a tighter situation, you're going to find that there's going to be a rush back towards developing relationships. And it could be, again, with a supply co-op, or as we're seeing with Walmart, it could be in a relationship with a farmer directly.
Though the hard work for Huyen has not changed.
I guess in 2003, no, I didn't think this was going to be possible.
What has changed is finding sustainability in the dairy industry as it adjusts and searches for a new normal. Reporting in Plymouth, Indiana, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. The Huon say the biggest advantage for them is to be able to say to consumers where their milk is going and where a consumer may buy it. They also say it's going to be sold under the Great Value brand. Now to trade. We could see the biggest stick yet in the trade battle with China. As early as this week, the president said to be supportive of plans to move ahead with tariffs on $200 billion in Chinese imports. Bloomberg reporting Trump is telling aides he intends to go through with the tariffs this week once public comment on the proposal is done. Other reports indicating they may be announced but take effect at a later date.
And the timetable was very important to us. We were on their side. We understand what they're trying to do, but how long can we stand the down economy? And how long is that runway? And we're going to stick with them, and this mitigation package that the USDA has brought out will help. The trade treaty in Mexico will help. And we just can't stop but that. We got to be on the aggressive side, and part of that mitigation package is to expand trade markets.
Sign up for farmers to apply for tariff assistance begins today. USDA's Farm Service Agency will administer the program to provide payments. Farmers will need to show evidence of their production in order to collect. Each payment is capped at $120,000 per person. In addition to the farmer aid, the program has money set aside to purchase commodities to use domestically and for trade promotion to develop new markets. Farmers say extra aid will help during lending season.
Farmers right now are thankful for anything they can get. I mean, hopefully that's going to parlay into something that keeps some of them afloat. And it's also going to give our banking industry a little bit of certainty about what's going on, because there's just a lot of uncertainty in ag when it comes to raising different crops. And as farmers get ready to go into the fall and pay those bank notes off and get ready to go into the next year, you know, having all the available income, or at least what can be available, is something to be huge going forward.
There may be a second payment period if warranted. Trade tensions are adding urgency to Farm Bill negotiations set to begin tomorrow. Work requirements on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program remains still one of the main disagreements between the House and Senate versions. Nutrition assistance accounts for more than 80% of the Farm Bill's funding and costs taxpayers about $70 billion a year. David Harker with AgDay affiliate WNDU is joining us once again for today's crop comments. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Clinton. Let's start out in York County, Nebraska. Nate Dormus showing us hailed out soybeans due to a big storm in his area. He says hail was not widespread. Neighbors just down the road didn't have any damage. And a farmer in Stearns County, Minnesota, writing on agweb.com, there's a possibility of a big crop in pockets of Minnesota, but areas are wet. He says Minnesota has received too much rain throughout the whole growing season and crop is behind in maturity. Now USDA is releasing another crop progress report later today, and hopefully we can get a little relief from the rain. A little drying trend may not be a bad thing. Let's take a look at the drought monitor. Notice on the screen the big pockets of drought still sitting in the Four Corners region, although some areas really need to dry out, and we'll have the details coming up for not only the week ahead but as well as the next 30 days. That's coming up later. For now, here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
When we come back, we're going to talk lean hog markets and the potential African swine fever in China could impact prices here at home. Plus,
the most amazing tractor ride I've ever had was last week. Stick around, folks, I'll tell you about it.
Plus, researchers look to the sea to see if seaweed can contain a cow's gassy emissions.
Join Andrew McRae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast that is all about production agriculture. Farming the Countryside is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and is brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services.
Elaine Cobb, author of Mastering the Grain Markets, our guest here on Ag Day today. Elaine, as we talk about this lean hog market, you know, we're here in Iowa at the Farm Progress Show. Lots of hogs are raised here. We have been watching what's happening in China. What does it mean for people here at home?
So the big headlines is the arrival of African swine fever in Asia, and not just China. I think they also discovered it in South Korea. But the number of hogs that have actually been affected there so far is minuscule. So it's just the scariness of those headlines and the potential that months down the road that could turn into a really large epidemic. That is what would make the markets excited about it, but so far obviously we haven't seen any bullish response in the U.S. hog futures.
Yeah, and part of our challenge here at home is we've just got a lot of hogs.
Yes, we have lots and lots of hogs, lots of pork in inventory, some hiccups in the processing of those hogs. So there is a lot of slack in the supply and demand of hogs domestically that would have to be taken up and addressed before the U.S. hog market could respond to any sort of a rumor from Asia.
Okay, so as we look at prices for lean hogs, we've been just kind of, waffling around in that $50 mark. Do you expect that to continue?
I do. I feel that the hog market has been pressured so far already, and frankly, the economy is doing well, and
Sure.
Retail consumers do tend to go buy meat, and meat tends to perform well when the economy is performing well. And at these prices, you mentioned that October hog contract bouncing around $50. This is a price which is generally, historically, a good cheap price to be buying hogs.
Okay, so you expect that to continue. Anything that folks selling hogs need to be considering moving through 2018?
Well, I think there is, we have to admit that there is certainly risk that Asian swine fever or African swine fever could become a bigger story. So I think there is risk that we could continue to bounce along at these bearish prices for quite a long time. So I think risk protection does make sense. Farther out, maybe farther out of the money puts that wouldn't cost too much money. That's not a terrible idea in this environment where there are these risky things over our shoulders.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you, Elaine. We'll be back with more Ag Day.
For more marketing advice, you can find Elaine's book, Mastering the Grain Markets, How Profits Are Really Made, on Amazon and elsewhere. Ag Day, brought to you by Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers. They don't just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize it, so crops deliver the max in return. Learn more at maxinmaxout.com.
Let's take a look at the jet stream map as we're into the new week and the new month as well. September already starting out dry, especially in the northeast. We've got this big dome of ridge of high pressure that is sitting over the eastern seaboard and a dip in the jet stream out west. Now we can only hope that more rain showers come for some of that relief of the drought-stricken areas in the Four Corners region. We will see system after system roll through, but minimal chances of showers, especially toward the eastern half of the nation. So we move throughout Tuesday into Wednesday. And what you're likely to notice is the dry conditions persisting in some locations of the Atlantic coastal region up into the northeast. Really not going to see a big precipitation event, at least until we get a bit later on in our forecast period, 7 to 10, even upwards of we'll say 20 to 30 days out. Now notice how the jet stream more becomes horizontal. So it's the heat. We've got a lot of warmth that will be building all across the southern half of the United States. Next system rolling in as we look to the new weekend. And that next system could provide more rain showers to areas, unfortunately, to the northern portions of the United States that don't necessarily need it. Let's talk about temperatures this week over the next 7 to 10 days. And we've got above normal conditions all up and down the eastern seaboard. And it also stretches into Southern California as well as Four Corners region. As mentioned, that's the drought-stricken areas that don't necessarily need to see any more heat. Notice below normal conditions up in the northeast, and that's what's also going to be the case when we talk precipitation. Below normal on that side. Precipitation does tend to pick up, especially in the Great Lakes and down into South Texas as well. We've got a lot of Gulf moisture that will be building over the course of the next week or two. As we get closer to the peak of the hurricane season, it tends to get a little bit more active, so that is something we'll be watching for more scattered showers and storms. Could be a bit wet in the Florida Peninsula even as we look to the new weekend. Now once we go 30 days out, here's what we're noticing. A lot more of the heat stretching up the entire western coastline up into the northwest. It remains normal or equal chances of above and below normal temperatures. When we talk precipitation, a little bit more relief of the monsoonal season there in the Four Corners region, below normal in the northwest. And as we transition to the eastern seaboard, the Atlantic coastal regions, it does get wet below normal when we talk 30 days out there in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll be watching the tropics very carefully as we look to the next 20 to 30 days. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some local forecasts. We're remaining sunny and hot out there in Ripley, California with a high temperature of 103. Moving to North Dakota, Scranton to be exact, 77 with sunshine. And Monticello, Florida, showers and storms likely with a high of 87.
When we come back, a quick trip around the grounds of the Farm Progress Show with Machinery Pete. And later, researchers are looking at seaweed's ability to cut emissions from the nation's cattle herd.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Machinery Pete is a farm show fanatic, and this year at Farm Progress Show, he found a few things worth sharing. Here's Pete.
Well, I had a lot of fun last week at the Farm Progress Show. Despite the rain that washed out the show Tuesday afternoon and turned the showgrounds into a mud bath Tuesday afternoon and Monday morning. Actually reminded me of covering a farm auction up here in the upper Midwest in March when the ground gets a little greasy, shall we say. But saw some cool stuff last week at the show. I got an up-close look at Caterpillar's new 5-seater UTV. I think that will do very well in the market, and that's coming out here right now. I got a look at Lankota's new hydraulic single-point hookup for the back of tractors. That was turning a lot of heads at the show. And then, of course, the Ideal Combine by Fendt and good folks at AGCO really had people talking. I actually met a farmer I know from southern Minnesota who came out of the cab and was just gushing and said, "Pete, you gotta check out that cab. It's just amazing." But probably the thing I'll remember most about the show was the floating tractor. Now, folks, if you saw the video I posted, this was courtesy of our friends at Mitas Ag Tires. And of course, flotation is a huge issue, compaction with all the wet harvest conditions. And they rigged up a New Holland T4 110 tractor with their big tires. And they got me up in the cab, and we drove this thing into the waterway on the edge of the showgrounds, 8 feet deep, and this tractor floated. Now, folks, that was an amazing sensation. I posted the video, and I had a comment on there. Someone said, "Pete, you know, that would be a heck of a manure pit agitator." Well, I tell you what, folks, that's one ride I ain't going on.
All right, thanks, Greg. Can seaweed make cattle more eco-friendly? These researchers think so. We'll get details next.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M7060, built to get the job done. See KubotaUSA.com or your local Kubota dealer for more information.
University of California researchers are studying whether feeding seaweed to dairy cows will reduce their emissions of methane. Early results are showing promise, and more studies are planned. Terry Shea from the Associated Press looks at this unique use of ocean algae.
It's breakfast time at this dairy farm at the University of California, Davis. But this cattle feed contains an unusual ingredient: seaweed.
We mix it with molasses, so it's a nice little sweet treat for them. We try to mix it as well as we can into their feed, but we have some cows that'll pick it out, and we have some cows that'll go right for the seaweed.
If they don't eat the seaweed, then we won't see any reduction in methane.
UC Davis is testing whether seaweed can reduce emissions of methane, a potent greenhouse gas that's released when cattle burp, pass gas, or make manure. Dairy farms and other livestock operations are major sources of methane. That's why California is requiring them to cut emissions by 40% by 2030.
Reducing methane ultimately means reducing greenhouse gases and reducing the impacts of climate change. So it affects everybody in the globe.
This is a wild Atlantic kelp.
Before feeding seaweed to the cows, UC Davis researchers tested in this lab, where they can measure emissions in fermenters that simulate cattle stomachs.
And we can test the effect of different feed additives on the gut microbiology.
Here we have some milk samples.
They also test milk samples for flavor and nutritional value. The methane content of the cow's breath is measured when they stick their heads in these feeding machines. The first study of the seaweed diet only involved a dozen cows, but early results show promise, and larger studies are planned.
And so far, it's very encouraging. We've seen over 30% of reduction in methane emissions.
Around the world, dairy scientists are looking for ways to reduce cattle emissions by spicing up their diet. They've tried garlic, oregano, cinnamon, and even curry, with mixed results. At the University of Wisconsin, researchers are studying how a cow's breed, as well as what and how much they eat, affects their emissions, which they measure with this treat dispensing device.
The machine draws air from the breath of the cow, and the machine continuously measures the concentrations of the methane in the air.
Really, what drives the emission from the cow is how much the cow eats. Because the more the cow is going to eat, the more she needs to process that feed, and the more methane she's going to produce.
Researchers hope seaweed and other food additives can help reduce emissions and make dairy farms more climate friendly. Terry Che, Associated Press, Davis, California.
All right, there you have it. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.